Thanks for joining me on episode 1199 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Jerry Fu. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to understand and resolve conflict is key, and one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mader.
I've seen folks that are working on being consistent with their money who then begin to lose weight, or they're working on consistency in their habits around productivity, and so they suddenly begin to find it easier to get control of their money, because consistency and discipline in one area always leads to consistency and discipline in others.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about investing in yourself through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about how consistency is a skill. I share how you can focus on 10 specific things to build consistency, and I also share how this works in all areas of life.
You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read, and that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast.
Consistency is a skill. It's an ability that you have that you can develop over time. Oftentimes we have those situations where we know that we're someone who, quote, procrastinates. A lot of folks describe themselves as dealing with procrastination. And consistency is an antidote to procrastination. Because when you work on a day-to-day basis with that goal of just being consistent, just doing the work, then it becomes easier to not put things off because you begin to be motivated easier. Remember, motivation is different than consistency. It's the getting started energy. You begin to develop the ability to get into flow and feel like you're moving forward with work. And because you avoid procrastination and those negative feelings, it becomes easier over time to continue to do that. Procrastination and consistency are pretty much opposites of each other. Procrastination is what stops us, what puts a block in our place. And consistency begins to move us forward. The truth is, we often get fixated on a goal and we get motivated to do it. And you show up, you do the work, you're excited, but then the novelty wears off and you begin to not stick to it anymore. You begin to not get up and do the work because it's just not exciting. So here's some of the things you can do to begin to develop that skill of being consistent. First, identify one goal. Don't try to do this at first with 50 things or all of your life, but just identify one component of your life, one area that you can put a goal to. And remember, a goal is got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's something that you can say, I began it, I've completed it. You can finish a goal. Then begin to tie that goal to an action. What do you need to do consistently over time to eventually accomplish that goal? So if your goal is to lose weight, what do you need to do? Are you going to exercise? Are you going to eat different? What's the action that you're going to take? Begin to master showing up to that. To do that, you want to commit to a time and a place. or an action or an activity. What is it you're going to execute, and when and where are you going to execute that? Be specific with that. Then you want to begin to track your progress against that. Have an idea of doing a streak or checking off boxes, some way of recording each time you do that, and focus on not breaking the streak. If you do it 4 days in a row and then have a break, next time try to do it 5 days in a row, because that keep going with the streak becomes the energy to keep going. Now, with that, you still have to admit that things are going to go wrong. You're going to fall off the wagon. You're going to have a bad day or a day where you're sick. And so I would encourage you to also have a little bit of grace for yourself. Recognize that you're developing a new skill, and that's going to take some time. As part of that, make sure that you're getting plenty of sleep and you're eating right. One of the things I've seen people break them of their consistency is because they're not taking care of their body and their mind with healthy habits like sleep and eating. Focus on making sure that the goal and the promise around that goal is one that you can keep, one that's actually possible. Make sure, too, as you complete and have wins, as you beat the streak that you had last time, as you lose a little bit of that weight, as you get a little bit better in that area, that you reward and recognize milestones and wins along the way. And the last tip is to keep it real. Recognize the fact is that you won't always be able to do it exactly the way you want to. Make sure that it's something that's realistic, something that is possible, and something that you actually can tie to real, true activity in your life. Over time, if you do that, you can then add other areas of your life. See, this simple loop of trying to focus on being consistent works in all areas. It works on your time. It works on your relationships. It works on your money. And what's interesting is discipline in one area of your life tends to bring on discipline in other areas. I've seen folks that are working on being consistent with their money who then begin to lose weight, or they're working on consistency in their habits around productivity. And so they suddenly begin to find it easier to get control of their money, because consistency and discipline in one area always leads to consistency and discipline in others. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.